Okay, my name is Travis Bliss, and my test, the test that I reviewed, was the PSAT, which is the Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test. Most of us are familiar with the SAT. Well, this is the Preliminary SAT. So, anyway, jump right into it. The overall time that it takes to do the test, it includes 60 minutes of reading, 35 minutes of writing and language, and then 70 minutes of math. And the math is broken into two parts. One part where the students are able to use their calculators, and then another part where they're not. So that adds up to a total of 165 minutes. We actually spent 4 hours doing the test, because by the time you take the breaks in between sections, by the time you read through all the demographic data, the explanation of the test, it's a good 4 hour chunk, but the actual test time is 165 of time they'll be putting pencil to paper, hopefully. The usefulness of the test. The things I thought were useful about it. It has 13 scores, including standards and convention scores. It has an overall score, which most people were all familiar with, the quote-unquote SAT score. But that's one of the 13. The other 12 drill down to be specifically things like, I teach math, so it's important for me to kind of get an idea of their math scores. So it includes not just whether or not they're scoring high on the math section, but what, like math problem solving, reasoning, writing. And then the part that I like, and the part that I'm going to emphasize more when I initiate this test in the future, is quote-unquote skills associated with academic achievement in college. And I believe the correlation rate's 87% on reading, 88% on math, which is really high, which is in essence what it's saying is that if you score what they would consider well on the PSAT, then therefore the students typically score well on the SAT. And those students that score in the category of above average or well go on, the research shows, 87% of the time to pass and do well on collegiate level courses in that field. So in other words, if Joe Blow scored above average on the SAT and PSAT, and then on the SAT, and then went on to take college algebra, odds are he would end up with a grade of an A or a B in that college algebra class. So it's a good correlation, and it also is something that you can theoretically should be able to relate to the students fairly well. Anyway, it's for grades 8 through 11, although I would caution against testing 8th graders unless they're in advanced level classes, and 9th graders. And in fact, and I'll get into this towards the end of the slide, I would try to push this back as far as I possibly could if you were going to try to test on it. One thing I did like too about it has real world questions without reading through that whole question there. This is kind of the throwback question that we've all seen before, where one person takes off at a certain speed. Madison does at 10 miles an hour. Her dad waits 2 hours, and then he takes off at 15 miles an hour. How long does it take him to catch her? So I like these questions because they're quote-unquote real-world questions, but at the same time they take into account their ability to conceptualize and use the mathematical knowledge that hopefully they've obtained through the course of their high school mathematics career. Now, on the flip side of that, if you will, we have more core content type questions, but those themselves are mixed with other areas. So in other words, this is a math question, but it includes terms like DNA sequencing. What else did it have in here? Samples and gene. So when the test gives you those 13 scores back, and you see one where it says something about their ability to understand mathematical terms, you obviously get that from this question, but it also scores them and bases their understanding on their reading skills and their ability to recall and understand terms such as DNA sequencing. So, I mean, the PSAT test itself, while this may look like just one simple, straightforward question where after you crunch the numbers, it comes out to $1,200. In essence, they're actually on this one question, they're testing 4 different capabilities of the student, which I find is really interesting. Off of a multiple choice answer, somehow they can derive the fact whether or not the student is successful in their processing base. So anyway, I think that's one thing that, and if you look here, the subject integration questions, no calculator allowed. So that means they're long handing it out on scrap paper that's provided for them in order to derive at this particular, whatever the particular correct answer is. Okay, areas for improvement. The Khan Academy is connected up to the PSAT. So when the students take the test, we turn it in. It's scored and graded. I don't score it or grade it. That's done by the PSAT folks. They then send the results back, they email them back to the students directly. And then in that email packet, every question they miss it outlines every question they missed, why they missed it, what they picked when they picked it wrong, like that multiple choice question we had on the previous one. Let's say they picked 480. Well, if we look at this question, it has 10 cents, 1,000, 120,000, and 100 samples. Well, then we know there should be no 480 in there, right? Or no 720 in there. You and I, we know that. But the high school level, they may not know that. It should come down to the AD answer, right? It's just a matter of whether or not it's 120 or 1,200. But if they picked 480, 720, it'll explain to them why neither one of those answers should be possible just by taking a basic glance at the question itself, knowing that we're dealing in units of 10,000, 120,000, and 100. There's no 4 in there. There's no 7 in there. There's no, anyway. And then then depend upon however they missed it. If they missed it because they picked A, it'll explain to them maybe what they did wrong as far as dividing the total overall number. Instead of multiplying, like approximately 10 cents, instead of multiplying their final answer by 10 cents by 0.10, maybe they multiply it by 0.01 or whatever. Anyway, and then it also links up to the Khan Academy website. So if they miss a particular kind of question, like say it's Algebra 101 question, it'll send them over there to Khan Academy. They can work modules over there, watch videos over there. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, they do that. So then that way, the next year when they take the SAT, those same type of questions come up. Theoretically, they'll get them right. The biggest problem I had where I was teaching or doing it I was giving this test to the sophomores, and 4-hour test. It was the second month of school, and they really just did not. So many of them, there was 32 of them that tested. So many of them, they didn't pay for the test. They were there on a school day, and they didn't relate why it was even important. They thought the P stood for practice, and they're like, I don't want to practice the SAT. Several of them fell asleep. Several of them, I had to make them leave the room because they were talking. So I think if you're going to administer this test, it has to be a sophomores if you could, and I'm going to advocate for this to be done with my school later in the year. Like I'm talking next semester, like April, maybe even May, because then 3 reasons. 1, it gives them more time to mature. 2, it gives them more time to gather that knowledge. There's several questions on there that I was looking at, and that information and content will be covered in our class that I'm teaching in January or February. So for them to just randomly come across question after question that they're like kind of no, but not completely no, problem. And then another problem is they have a lack of preparation on knowing things like as simple as their address. 5 of them said, it says here for me to put down my physical address. I don't know my physical address. That was an eye-opener for me, because next time I administer the PSAT, I'm going to meet with the students a week in advance and say, these are the things you need to know coming into the test. You need to know your address, your physical address. You need to know you're going to be in this room testing for 4 solid hours. You'll get to leave 3 or 4 times for 5-minute breaks, but other than that, it's pencil to paper, it's multiple choice, it's grinding away at this test for literally hour after hour. To kind of prep them for it. And then again, a part of that is hopefully this will teach them how to do those things so that when they take the SAT, it won't be so abstract to them. But I hate for this to be such a splash of cold water for so many of them that when I was sorting through the Scantrons to send away to PSAT, and I'm finding like just blank pages of parts where the questions should have been answered, address is missing, email address is just, we really need to sit down and have these are the ways you test. We don't want to assume anything with these students ahead of time. We want to, I think, explain to them, like I said, about a week in advance. Okay, here's what you're going to need to know and understand about how to test. Anyway, so I think that would probably be a top concern going forward. Anyway, okay. So in conclusion, and this is basically what I was talking about here, take it later in the year. Understand that this diagnostic test is good for the students and the teachers once the information gets back, and make sure they understand that it is an important test, and that it is something that is, and as an aside, it's National Merit Scholarship Test is on the side is what is considered. But like it said in the review that I did, he was talking about majority of students honorable mention, let alone a scholarship, is a very, very remote possibility. So that's why I don't emphasize on that much, because I don't want them to go into this thinking, well, this is going to get me a scholarship, done deal. I mean, it is something to throw out there, but like he said in the review, it's 50,000 out of close to 3 million that'll get that, and depending upon the class that you're administering this to, you can gauge for yourself whether or not you want to emphasize that or just emphasize the simplicity of this is in preparation to teach you and help you understand what you're going to need to do in order to pass and do well on the SAT test. Anyway, all right, thanks for watching.